let me just give a brief background on Min and Jennifer before we start. So Min Tsai is the founder and CEO of Hodo Soy, based in Oakland. He started in 2004 with a single farmer's market stand, and now he sells his tofu and yuba in 700 stores nationwide. When I first met Min, I think it was in December, I was really nervous because people who are as passionate about something tend to be very passionate. And so I was pretty nervous, but it was really wonderful. I met them at their factory, and they gave me a nice tour of their factory, and it was really fun. And if you haven't gone yet, you really should. It's a really wonderful experience, and really something that you wouldn't be able to experience anywhere else in the US, I believe. So. And he's also the first person who introduced me to yuba. I had no idea what that was, and I was kind of grossed out by it when they said it was the skin of tofu, but it's delicious. You'll be able to sample a couple of the chef's dishes of that tonight. So I'm really excited and pleased that he agreed to present with us today at the museum. And it is really through his connections that all these wonderful chefs are participating, so thank you again. And Jennifer Lee, she is the co-founder and CEO of Plimpton, a San Francisco-based literary studio that innovates in digital publishing. She is a former New York Times reporter, and she produced The Search for General Tso. Has anyone watched that documentary? Yay! Yeah, so we're really, really thankful that she also agreed to moderate this discussion, so thank you. I also wanted to thank our donors and sponsors of the Tasting Menu Series, Kaiser Permanente. I think we have a few members here in the audience tonight. We really wouldn't be able to put on a program of this scale without their generosity, so thank you again. So I'm going to turn it over to Min and Jennifer. So the program will be go kind of a discussion with them, and then the chefs will come up to introduce their dishes and their relationship with Hodo. And then we will open it up for a Q&A, and the food will not begin serving until 7:30, so even if you try to go earlier, we won't serve it to you, so please be patient. So anyway, please join me in welcoming Min and Jennifer.
So I understand you used to work in finance, and now you're in tofu. So how did that happen? And how do your parents feel about that?
Wow, the first pitch. Don't you know there's so much money to be made in tofu? Yeah. Yes, it's true. I used to be in finance. I was an investment banker. And I'm actually doing tofu because I wanted to do something that is less recession-proof. So food, we all have to eat, and I didn't like getting laid off, and I didn't like my friends getting laid off, so I'm obsessed with food, so that's how I ended up with tofu.
And so how does one even start? So, so you're working with spreadsheets one day, and then suddenly you're in a farmer's market the other day. So, what is that transition, and how do you end up just, opening up a shop or, starting a business?
So we've done this for a long time now, since 2004. And food just takes a long time for people to really get, and tofu takes a long time. I ended up doing tofu specifically because I grew up in Vietnam eating really delicious tofu. And you know what they say about the sense of smell. Whenever I walk by some place that's making fresh soy milk, it takes me back to being a kid, going to the local Tofu Shack with my grandfather, and I couldn't find that experience here. So I thought, okay, well, if I want to eat good tofu and I want to cook more and get into food, I should learn how to make it. And so that's how I ended up in tofu, is I made good tofu. I thought, yeah, don't you guys all want to eat good tofu? And that was really crazy. But over the years, I managed to convince a lot of people, including the chefs that are downstairs tonight, that there is a distinction between really good tofu versus commodity tofu.
And so when you first started selling in farmers market, I mean, what were the conversations that you had? And, you know, like, I mean, it's pricey, right? I mean, this is
Yes.
cheaper than, I mean, this is much more expensive than like the, you know, $1.09 kind of block of tofu that you get at your Safeway.
Right.
So what is the story you're telling your potential customers? I mean, of course, they're like kind of, you know, they're the kind of people that end up at farmers market, so they're sort of
Right.
receptive.
So that's a good point. So the good news is we have yet to raise our price from the first time that we sold tofu at the farmers market till now. So our prices hasn't gone up. So yay.
Okay. It's like 13 years.
Yes, exactly. So that's the
Imagine if real estate in San Francisco had stayed like that.
right. Wrong investment.
Right.
So that's a good news. But the conversations were really fascinating because the farmers market was a place for us to experiment, and we chose it for that purpose. And it was very serendipitous that we happened to choose the farmers market because we want adventurous eater to try tofu and different recipes. We did want people who were willing to pay more for it. And we also wanted an environment where we can get instant feedback. So at the farmers market, if you were one of the people shopping, I would hand you a sample, and hopefully you won't ask me what it is. You would just eat it, and then you would have a reaction. You know, it could be like, wow, that's delicious, what is it? And then I engage you in that conversation. I'll say, it's tofu, and you say, no, it's not. I've had tofu, it's not like this. And I say, yes, it is. So now we have a conversation. And so we started at a time where there aren't that many farmers markets. There were about 16 farmers markets back then, and now there are 160.
In the Bay Area.
In the Bay Area. So it's a great launching pad for a business like ours.
Right.
So we were very lucky to be there. And it's also a great place for all the chefs. They shop at the farmers markets. So then they came and they're like, wait, you're selling tofu. It's a great ingredient. And that's how we ended up growing with the chefs and with our customers.
And so you start, basically, it's just you when it's at the farmers market, or is there anyone else with you?
Yeah, I actually started this business with 6 other cousins.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yay, Asian families.
Yay,
Yeah.
families, right. And then one after another, they just thought, this is too hard. especially when we had to sell during the winters. And I mean, 2008, that was brutal. It rained like 90 days straight. And you know, we're standing there. I remember selling $12 of tofu, thinking, should I still be doing this? But so they eventually just one after another decided that it wasn't for them. And again, I was crazy enough to keep going.
And now, you know, you can find Hodo soy in Costco, in, I guess, Chipotle, I think are you guys the master supplier?
The master, yes. We're the exclusive supplier to Chipotle.
Like all across the
All
country?
across the
Not just in
country.
the Bay Area?
Yes.
That's like really, so like from Min in
Like
the
we made it.
$12, and now he's like the supplier for Chipotle. And what I mean, one thing that I found really surprising when I was talking to you is that you're still a relatively small company, but now that still makes you the 3rd largest tofu company in the entire United States, because the other 2 are like, they're big.
They're huge.
How huge are they?
So having a finance background comes in handy when you have to do the research needed to start a business. So tofu was introduced here in the 70s as a vegetarian plant-based food. And it sort of grew very slowly because it wasn't that tasty and people didn't know what to do with it, except for Annie and Greens downstairs. But over time, because it's such a foreign food and it was not very well introduced, it became this sort of cheap, commoditized product. And to be able to make it and sell it at $1.99, you have to be really big in manufacturing. So we have, to this day, we have 2 large foreign companies, one Korean and one Japanese, that sell to more than 80% of the markets in the entire United States. So if you don't eat Hodo tofu, you're most likely eating tofu from one of these companies.
Even though, I mean, the labels are all different. Like you get ones in like 99 Ranch and Safeway and whatnot.
Right.
And so it all looks different.
They look different, but these large companies have the ability to co-pack for a lot of other brands. So 365, because literally it's not that easy to actually open a manufacturing plant. And so when we were growing back then, one of the ideas was to actually have somebody make the quality of tofu that we wanted. But I couldn't find anyone. So again, dove into it and built a tofu plant in West Oakland. And so that's where we make all of our tofu now, and hopefully we'll have a new plant up in Sacramento in a year.
And so how many employees are now in the Oakland plant?
So we have a little bit over 100 employees, all making delicious tofu. We do serve nationally now outside of Chipotle. What's interesting for us, and something I'm really proud of and hopeful with, is that we are really broadly spread. Like we work with Chipotle, we work with some other chains, like Sweet Greens, but we also work with like exclusively like single restaurant chefs. So because the diversity of the type of products we produce from the soybeans is so vast that that allows us to be really nimble. Like from liquid to solid, there's a whole spectrum of textures and flavors. So it, one of the things I love to do the most is really working with chefs to help them determine how they want to put together a dish and what texture and flavors they want.
Right. And there really is, I mean, I've been to the factory, there's obviously, basically yuba, which is sort of almost like sheets of tofu all the way up to, yes.
There you go.
Yes, it's like amazing, it's sort of like, it's just like soy milk and suddenly this like skin forms on the surface and they kind of pick them up. And then all the way up to firm tofu. And I understand that you have opinions on sort of the firmness of tofu in America and like how, like why is it that like firm tofu is the way it is? Because it's not something that you see that much actually in Asia. I mean, we get the sort of hard smoked, like tofu gan kind of thing, which is not
the braised
quite,
tofu, yes.
The braised tofu, like it's hard, it's brown, it's like clearly a thing. But then there's this other kind of tofu-ness in America that I don't see actually as often when I'm in China or Taiwan.
Right. So with any food, that's a great question. With any food, you have two choices. You either make it fresh and eat fresh, or you have to sort of save it and preserve it. So the Chinese equivalent would be the tofu gan or the braised tofu. Here in America, actually when tofu was first introduced, it was really the jiggly soft tofu as well, but people just didn't know what to do with it. Remember, this is supposed to be a meat-like thing. The soft jiggly tofu will fall off the grill. So that's why we in America invented firm and extra firm tofu so that it wouldn't fall off the grill. Now the challenge with that is firm and extra firm tofu does not absorb flavors. So this is the science and the art behind tofu. Many of you probably think tofu will take on whatever flavors, but tofu does not. And therein lies the disappointment. After the sauce right on the surface of the tofu is consumed, often you get this weird, chalky flavor. So what we try to do for firm tofu. So actually for the first 5 years, we didn't make firm tofu because I was stubborn.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not gonna give in. And then finally, when we did make a firm tofu, I wanted to make a firm tofu that actually has flavor. And you taste it, there we go, technical.
I don't even know. I can.
But it doesn't matter, we'll fix it. Matt's here to fix it.
Matt's here to fix it? Okay, make the PowerPoint come back.
Right. But the firm tofu we make is one where it's got more fat, more protein. So when you eat whatever flavor that it's on that tofu, you have a secondary taste. And this is how we make it. kind of like cheese, we press it.
Right, and it's kind of really interesting because when you bring up cheese, because I've done a lot of research on early Chinese food in America, and the Chinese immigrants on the shores. And so if you go actually back to the early newspapers in California, when the Celestials, which are the Chinese, arrived in San Francisco, you have these interesting articles by Mark Twain and other writers of the time that talk about this mysterious bean cheese, by these strangers who also eat rice with sticks, right? Like how crazy is that?
Right.
And to a certain extent, tofu and cheese, France doesn't have tofu, Asians really don't have cheese, or historic Asian food doesn't have cheese. Now the Japanese are really into cheese, but they're actually very similar, even though they're sort of mutually exclusive relative to the cultures. And so, what are the commonalities between cheese and tofu, and everything from the textures to how they're produced, and
Right.
the coagulants and whatever. So, yeah, I'm kind of very curious, right? Because you're bean cheese.
It is,
right?
yeah, it's very similar because tofu, the invention tofu is an accident, just like probably the invention of cheese. Somebody put milk in a bladder. Well, tofu, somebody was cooking a pot of soybeans and that water didn't taste great. So they decided to add a flavor to it and they added vinegar, because salt didn't taste that good. And the vinegar caused that protein to form a curd, just like cheese, So the only difference between tofu and cheese is the fact that in cheese you want it to age, so you add a live culture. In tofu, you actually add a mineral to coagulate the protein. That is the main difference between the two. There's a fascinating article, I think it's in the New Yorker, 1977 or two, but you can look it up. It's about a journalist who went to Japan to talk to a tofu maker. And the last section of the article was about her going to his mountain retreat, where he brought out a really delicious bottle of Burgundy white wine. And she said, wait a minute, we can't open this because we have nothing that would go with it. And he said, no, you just wait. And so the implication there is he's about to bring out a tofu cheese to go with the wine. So, but we have tofu. I like saying that it's cheese-like because it helps consumer really understand the making of it. It's such a mystery for us where tofu comes from. So we do these events, we have tours, we really want to expose people to, the provenance of this food, the history of this food. And so that's part of our heritage and part of our job. So we've done that for the last decade or more, and we'll continue to do that so that, you as the audience will be able to understand where it comes from and what's good tofu, what's yuba, and really bridging not just, the sort of the historical elements of tofu, but also with what chefs are doing today with tofu. And for us, that's the only way for tofu to grow in America, at least for me, is I believe that we really need the help and the innovations, not just from us, but from chefs, and demand higher quality over time.
And so what is the coagulant that you add to tofu? Is it the same across everything, or does it matter?
It's the same. So there are two main types of coagulant that people use to make tofu. You can use any acid, lemon, vinegar, but the tofu would taste sour. So the Japanese uses nigari, which is a byproduct of sea salt, and the Chinese uses calcium sulfate, which is a mineral, calcium and sulfur. And the distinction is the Chinese uses calcium sulfate because they want the whole fragrance of the beans. So it doesn't mask anything about the beans. The Japanese would have used calcium sulfate, except they couldn't find it in Japan. So they use nigari, which is a bittern. So Japanese tofu has a slightly sweeter but bitter flavor. So that's the main distinction.
And so, you compare cheese and tofu, and one of the things that's really interesting, of course, is cheese, that people get all snobby about it because you can buy it for it's $25 a pound in Buy Right or whatnot. So for tofu, if you were to educate the audience, like how does one become snobby about tofu? Like how can you tell good tofu from the bad tofu? Like what kind of words can they drop in conversation to impress?
All right, you guys are gonna go home with some vocabulary about good tofu.
Yeah.
No, I hope, well, first of all, you just gave me the idea of making $25 tofu.
Yeah.
Right?
Per pound.
Aged tofu.
I mean, if you count your yuba, that's like per
That's
pound,
right.
That's like $32 per pound.
That's like $100. That's gold.
Yeah.
But no, so food is funny. It's subjective. Okay, but people still say, well, you're the tofu guy. What is good tofu? So for me, the way I look at it is, if you can get fresh tofu, that's the best. Made with fresh soy milk, especially our soy milk. But tofu should have a distinct flavor of its own. It should be beany, buttery, and creamy. If you don't find those things, it's probably not good tofu.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So that's the easiest thing. And the way you find it on a label often is you want to find a label of tofu and the nutritional value. You want something with the highest protein possible, the highest fat possible. And because...
Is there fat in tofu? Because the whole idea
yeah,
is
there's fat in soybean and tofu, yes. Fat makes everything taste yummy.
Yeah.
So,
fat and sugar.
And sugar and protein. So when we source the organic soybeans in the U.S., we buy all of our soybeans in the U.S., our plant manager is sitting there, we just had a conversation. What specification do you look for? High sugar, high fat, high protein.
In the bean.
In the beans.
How do you test that?
You actually send it to a lab.
Oh.
And then you make the tofu and you taste it. So for us, we have
batch per farm?
Now we gotta get super technical. Yeah, we actually have a whole process before we actually buy a whole year's worth from a farm. Yeah, so that's how you can distinguish good tofu.
So it's like wine in some way, right? It's like the vintage of the bean in this farm at this time.
I liken it to cheese. It's like making cheese with cream will taste a lot better than making cheese with skim milk. We make tofu with the thickest soy milk we can make, and that's why we have to charge you more, because we make less of it. And if you make a commodity tofu with a thinner milk that's diluted, then you can make more tofu. Then you can get it for under $2. Should we have the chefs come up?
Yeah, I don't know. Are they here?
I think they're over there. I know you guys are. I know you guys are here for the chefs. So
yes, and the answer
come on
is
up,
yes.
guys.
Because I was looking for them there, and I'm like, where are they? But now I see that they are behind us. Thank you.
Yay! Come on up. Come on up.
Three of the most renowned chefs.
Yes.
Hi. We were at the tofu plant together, and I think we might need a handheld mic.
Yeah.
I think.
Unless you guys want to wear one of these Korean superstar
Yeah,
mics.
no, totally. Like I feel like we're gonna
Yeah.
get
We're gonna dance later. Yes.
On stage. So these are three of your most loyal customers.
They are.
Oh, they each got a handheld.
I have to twist the arm. No, I'm kidding. Let me see if Sylvia is going to introduce you, or do I get the honor?
I think you get the honor
Oh,
to introduce
yes.
them and how you know them and how.
So probably the greatest joy for me in having a food business is to be able to go eat at restaurants and ask for reservations. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Well, I will actually say one of the reasons I said yes to do moderating his panel so I could meet the chefs. And then like.
We're so lucky because in the Bay Area, not only do we have amazing chefs, but we actually have chefs who really care about ingredients and provenance and supportive of local businesses and locally grown produce. And there are three testaments to what I was talking about here. So I'm going to start first with Annie because we have the longest relationship with Annie. Annie Somerville is the executive chef at Green's Restaurant. Yes. And I can talk for a long time about Greens, but Greens is one of the first restaurants that we convinced to use our tofu. And Annie's got a delicious example of that downstairs. So Thank you, Annie, for being here.
Thank you.
Next, we have Brandon. Brandon is the newest of the restaurant, Mr. Chu, Brandon Chu. What I love about what Brandon does is he makes Chinese food, but he uses amazing ingredients, and he takes our tofu, and he adds all these fascinating twists, to traditional recipes. Mapo tofu under Brandon's hand will taste like something that's, you can remember the mapo tofu part, but you also, wow, it's new and it's different. So thank you for being here. Brandon, this is your second Disrupt.
Thanks for having me.
I think Matt might turn it up later. And then to my left is Stuart Brioza, who's the executive chef at The Progress and State Birds, my kids' favorite restaurants. And Stuart, I remember 6 years ago, wanted to learn about yuba. And I was on vacation, and he called, and I answered, and I thought, we're gonna do something fun with this chef. So it's been, more than 6 years since the beginning of the State Bird first.
For sure.
Yeah, and Stuart's got some amazing yuba dishes down there for you to try. But before we do that, I want Jennifer to see if you have any questions for the chef, but I have just one question for them,
Yes.
which is, where is tofu and yuba gonna go, guys?
Yuba is interesting. And also, I just want to say, yuba is one name for it, but also
Is tofu skin, yeah.
tofu skin. It's one of the more
Can we-
interesting kind of ingredients.
You might have to shout.
Is it working?
It's working.
Yes.
There you go.
Sure.
Go for it.
Well, I don't know where it's going to go that it hasn't gone already. When you research tofu, it seems that, tofu is referenced through regional dishes, right? And what you're doing with tofu, and really probably where I started to think outside of the box was the introduction of tofu through you. Always had tofu and have enjoyed it. There was a long disconnect with tofu in my childhood.
I love that word. Disconnect in childhood.
Disconnect,
And thanks to your wife.
Yeah, and I see tofu as being used so regularly in Bay Area restaurants in ways that are not traditional, but maybe referencing tradition, or completely just untraditional, whether it's using for wrapping or pasta or, in ways that it's like thinking about it as a protein. And I just wonder, one of the things I was thinking about coming on stage was, where are other chefs across the country who are eating tofu in our restaurants, who are visiting the Bay Area? Where are they going to get this kind of quality? If I really associate Hodo soy as a very Bay Area specific product, not to say that it couldn't go national by any means, but thinking about tofu and the beans that are raised in different parts of the country, that there's actually like a lot of opportunity for tofu to be crafted by artisans such as yourself.
If
And I
you
think
open
that
a
that's where
restaurant
it's
in the
gonna
East
go
Coast,
really
I'll go.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you. And you should talk about your dish real quick.
Oh, sure.
Yes, so we know what we'll be tasting.
All right.
Or dishes. You got a bonus dish.
We've got two dishes tonight that we're going to do. One is a yuba noodle dish, and it's a cold yuba noodle in a sesame, tahini, kind of chili oil dressing with pickled mushrooms and a little toasted quinoa. And the second dish is one that we've been experimenting with, and my chef at State Bird, Gabby, she has been focused on making a silken tofu. And I think it was really after our trip to Hodo not too long ago that we decided to really take your advice on how to make silken tofu. And we make it daily at the restaurant. So we're going to do a little silken tofu cold dish with little ramps and clams.
Delicious.
Because Min, you don't sell silken tofu, do you?
We don't.
He did.
He did.
We
and
did a long
Min
time
does
ago,
not.
but now we sell the soy milk, and we
Yeah.
teach you how to make it.
Yeah.
So,
Which is pretty great. It's
Very
it's
DIY.
it's it's an ingredient we used to buy a lot of, and about halfway through it would be broken up into curds and
yes.
and like the water that comes out. The curds in the way of the tofu, so to speak.
Right.
So this is a really nice way to do it, to have restaurants actually make their own, and it's kind of cool that you can make kits.
Yes.
You can sell to the public for that.
Yes. Thank you.
I think where tofu is going to go is when people start thinking of how to eat more vegetables and less meat in their diet, and how to be creative with their own diet. As we think about the impact of all of that meat being raised and slaughtered, and all the industry behind how that goes, from truck to truck, and there's just a lot of resources being zapped, and I think I myself have changed my diet to eat more vegetables, and I think it's more challenging at the restaurant to use as many vegetables as that are out in the season. So, tofu for us at Mr. Ju's is, and having Hodo so close by, we feel like they're a huge asset to our restaurant because, we use their firm tofu, their soy milk, their tofu skin, and we use it as in many dishes as we possibly can, especially vegetarian dishes. And they're not meant to be vegetarian. We just find that there's when there doesn't have to be meat in there, it doesn't really need it. Mainly because that soy milk is so rich and has a lot of potential for interesting texture. Right now we're wrapping little baby fava beans in that tofu skin, and then battering them and frying them, and it actually creates this other layer inside when it fries. And actually, the dipping sauce we make is a bunch of shucked fava beans that are just blanched and pureed with more tofu, and that tofu almost acts like ricotta in a way. It becomes that rich. So I think for us, it's just about using soy milk and all of Min's tofu products in as many creative ways as possible. But to kind of Stuart's point, we're also very interested in really old techniques too. I think that inspires us every day, and I think learning from the past is going to help propel the future. But also, I feel like tofu just needs I think people just need to have more fun with it, which I always felt about Chinese food in general. I mean, people usually eat Chinese food because they want to go out and have fun, and sometimes at the restaurant, I have to remind myself people go out to eat to have fun, and tofu is. I think people just need to maybe be open again to another experience. And if their first one was a negative one, because I think what Min's producing is very
that like
special.
tofurkey?
Yeah, that could.
I didn't say that.
You have a tofurkey competitor coming down the pipeline?
Actually, I don't have, we don't think of us having competition simply because the tofu market is so young and small. So I actually teach people how to start tofu businesses. It's crazy, it's counterintuitive. But the idea is, if I can convince someone to make really high quality tofu, it's good for everybody. So we don't think of if you make delicious plant-based protein, it's great for everybody. So for me, taste is paramount. You win with taste, and everything else is icing on the cake. So tell us about your dish. Did you tell us about your dish?
Oh yeah, my dish is kind of a take on mapo tofu. It's one of my favorite dishes of like Chinese classic cuisine. I feel like it's like the Chinese like chili con carne, and like my body craves it, especially when it's like cold outside. But this one is made with. I've always enjoyed how delicate the tofu is with a very robust, very spicy sauce, and how that delicate flavor and texture plays with how strongly flavored that sauce is. And I think that we wanted to make a silken with that really spicy mapo sauce to kind of show like almost like the two sides of those like characteristics. So yeah, it's just, we use ribeye cap. It's like the top part of a ribeye, and we dice that up. It gets seared in the wok, and then it gets fermented bean paste, fermented black beans. We just ferment a bunch of chilies at the restaurant, and that gets pureed with a little bit of garlic, scallions, chili oil, and a little bit of like Szechuan peppercorn on top. Pretty traditional, but untraditional at the same time.
Thank you. Okay, Annie, where are we going? You have history of tofu.
We have a lot of history with tofu. And I'll just say that Min's, very good friend of Min's, who was a neighbor of mine, just got me started on serving hodosoi at Greens. And we, at the time, were using wildwood tofu, which people may be familiar with, and which was, I thought, we have really good tofu, and it was organic. But she kept working away at me, and I finally said, okay, we're going to do it. And, you know, I just feel that it's like the hodosoi tofu is like, and I hate to make this comparison, but it's really like a really great cheese, and it really is a very, very fine tofu. It's just delicious. It's creamy. It's rich. It's got all those qualities that everybody's been talking about, and let's just say we haven't gone back. And then we use it a lot in our, and of course Greens is a vegetarian restaurant. We've always had tofu on the menu. But I would say this is a real step for us to be serving the hodosoi, and for so many years, I think since maybe 2004, 2005.
Yeah, from day one.
Yep. And I remember when they had their little stand out in the front of the Ferry building, the Ferry Plaza Farmers Market, and then you had a stand inside as well. So,
Yeah.
yes.
So we were Annie was one of our first customers at the farmers markets for herself and also then for the restaurant. Thanks to my partner, Kai.
Yes, Kai did a good job.
Right.
And I also want to say in terms of where it's going, I totally agree with what both Stuart and Brandon are saying. I think just in terms of where we are with our environment and, you know, just pasture-raised animals and all the feed that goes into, you know, into these animals. And I think that also, I think tofu's where vegetables used to be, which is just that a lot of people are realizing there's just a lot of great ways to get your protein in a really healthy way, and to combine tofu with all kinds of great sauces and delicious vegetables, and to really, you know, come up with some really inspiring dishes. So I think we're doing it, and we'll keep going.
And tell us about your dish.
So what we're doing tonight is probably the most traditional. It's a fresh spring roll and a rice wrapper, so that takes care of anyone who does not eat gluten.
Thank you.
Yep. And the other is, and then of course lots of strips of tofu and crunchy vegetables, carrots, chilies, cabbage, cucumber, and then we just, a Thai basil, mint, and then we just wrap that up, and we're serving that with a peanut sauce, a peanut coconut sauce, little spicy peanuts, and then a salad of grilled beach mushrooms, nicely thinly sliced radishes, and some greens.
Yay.
Yummy. And we also realize that we are what is between you and these dishes. So we're going to open up the floor to Q&A. and then we can go eat at a certain point. And I think there's a microphone kind of like, okay, and I feel the enthusiasm coming from that corner.
So yeah, we'll field a few questions. We can share one up here. Yeah.
We get the mic.
Oh, we need one. We should have one. Yeah.
So that way, do you see? Or I don't know if they're going to listen to me with the mic, so I don't know who they're going to give it to.
Sylvia, are you going to give the mic to the?
Yes, we're going to
Okay,
give the
wonderful.
mics. Hold on.
Or like her. Oh, good.
Hi, this question is for Min. Have you considered making a tofu donut? I've seen them in Japan, like they make them fresh. I think you can have a farmer's market stand for donuts.
I've read about them. I have not tasted them. If you're interested in making the donut and selling at the farmers markets, come talk to me.
I'll talk to you. I'm a
Okay.
lawyer by training, so I'm not sure.
Hey, ex-banker right here.
I mean, like,
I think my question can be continued to her question. What do you use for the throughout beverages? The tofu?
Oh, the okara.
Yes.
Yes. So for those of you who don't know, like we have the pulp of the soybeans. It's currently being fed to organic cattle, but we have a few products coming out. So we actually don't waste anything.
You
So,
can make a donut. Second question
oh, you get two?
is, sorry. So you mentioned we can use tofu to make lots of fun dishes. Yes, I think soybean milk can also use as a milk to make clam chowder soup, except you don't want to boil continuously, just once it's cooked. it's
Yes.
done.
Yes.
And
So, well,
suddenly-
let me answer. I want other people to ask questions. So, but you made a great point. So one of my favorite dish is actually what I call 咸豆腐, which is savory soy milk. 咸豆浆.
Yes.
So it's very popular. Where I take a hot bowl of soy milk, I add a little bit of red vinegar and soy sauce and something crunchy, and that's a delicious breakfast. If anyone wants to open a breakfast restaurant. All right. Yes.
This is for Min. Sorry. Can you describe a tofu shack?
A tofu shack. Okay. So there used to be a lot more tofu shacks here in the U.S. It's generally opened by Japanese or Chinese who wanted to make tofu to serve their community. The one that is very popular now is in San Jose. It's called San Jose Tofu. It's essentially a very small tofu maker. They still grind the bean in very traditional stone grinders. They cook the soy milk with fire instead of sort of steam. And then they use scoop to, and they add the coagulant, they mix it. It's very similar to traditional cheese making. But the difference is when you walk by a cheese maker, you're going to smell all the ferment and the yeast, and the funk. You do not want that when you walk by a tofu shack. You want to smell the fragrance of the soybeans. And if you cook beans and you open the lid, that's the smell that you'll smell if you go to a tofu shack somewhere in Asia. Yeah.
Okay, so before I take any more questions, I'm going to ask if anyone has questions for the chefs, because I'm going to do a time check and I want to send them downstairs to finish prepping. So
Yes.
This is my question for the chefs. I have started eating local animal products in my neighborhood, and I've noticed how much healthier I feel and the better quality of meat that comes with it. And so my question to you is actually in relation to the real estate that's happening in San Francisco. With everything that's getting so expensive to own land and open up a restaurant, but you all want to promote this idea of local food and supporting local farms and local businesses. What kind of advice would you give to new restaurants that open up that want to follow this same kind of method to support local businesses and farms, but still be able to survive in San Francisco real estate?
That's a tough question. But it's really, I don't think that there's any other way to really think about opening up a restaurant in a place like the Bay Area, especially these days. You know, I think it's more of a full circle conversation, right? Where, you know, you support members of the community that are producing goods within the community. The money stays in the community. They're supporting you, the friends, the facilitators. It's sort of, you start really seeing these very common patterns, and it becomes a really nice circle of culinary life, so to speak. And we see that at the markets specifically. Not only are farmers that we're buying from, they're frequenting our restaurants, but so are the patrons who are buying from the farmers. And yet we're still sharing from that same idea. It really starts to make a lot of sense, and you think about the employees that are a part of your restaurant, and you know that philosophy that they take on, and it propagates this idea of a full service community that really supports itself. Regardless, restaurants have always had a huge history of being challenging to operate for a number of reasons, not only real estate, but staffing costs. Staffing costs are also, you know, raise the price for food costs and everything else. We can just go right down the list. It's a trickle-down effect. And I look at restaurants are really sort of the last stop of the bus, you know. We're buying food, we're serving it, consumers are eating it. And so we do tend to get all of those associated costs that come through. And I think it's what keeps us working harder.
We can have a whole, 3 hours on that, because that's why I don't open a restaurant, because it's such hard work. So,
I don't advise it.
Yeah. So,
No, I'm kidding. I don't,
question over
I
there.
think
Hi.
it's a great idea.
Oops.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I am a believer in winning people with good taste as well, and you guys all mentioned that's a big reason why you source and buy from Hodo. And I just wonder, there's so much more that is behind this company, how it treats its employee, how it sources its beans, its impact on the environment and all that. Is there room to talk about that with consumers, or how do you talk about that with consumers? Or is this even a trend that we need to go down for the food industry?
It's a big topic.
Yeah.
No, these are intense.
You want to give her the mic?
Yes.
Thanks, Annie.
I think it's, as much as we can, educate people, educate our guests, our diners, our dining public about where our food comes from, and also, any stories that we can tell are always really helpful. And it's a big topic. And it's also really admirable that Min's company, that Hodo Soy, is taking such good care of staff and doing all the right things and setting a really great example for others.
I think that today, with the internet, with the interest in food, I think people do care about taste primarily, but then you also want the story about the people who are making what you're eating, from the person serving you, the chefs behind it, the farmer that grows it. So wherever there's an opportunity to make these connections, we try to do it, and these chefs try to do it. And I think the customers really, it's part of the dining and the consumption experience. So I think it's the way, if you ask, I'm sure there will be answers, in that thing. It's why we're here. Yeah.
It's what brings all of us here and why the chefs are here. Basically to do educational events through food. And, and if it's great that you guys are all here. And if you go back and you tell 3 more people, it exponentially grows the amount of information that we propagated through the stage.
We spend a lot of time, I know all 3 of us, educating our cooks, our front of house, so that when you guys ask a question like that, that we're able to give you that answer and tell you more about the products that we use and the people behind them. But we also try not to like bombard you when you come sit down, but we do educate our staff, put a lot of time into that. So I would just encourage you guys to ask more questions if you're interested when you're out to dinner, because most likely if the waiter doesn't have an answer, someone in the building will have one for you.
And do that at the restaurant. Don't do that at the line tonight, because everyone wants to get to their food, okay? Go to their restaurants and ask those questions. Should we let these guys go?
Yes.
Thank you, chefs.
So, thank you.
All right.
We'll see you down there.
Yes.
And now we get to eat.
No, so I think in the meantime, we have some time for a couple more questions while we let the chef go back down.
We don't get to eat, sorry.
Yes, so we have one back here.
I want you guys to ask Jennifer a question. She gets to ask all the questions.
I know, that's why, that's a much better position to be in, actually. But-
Thanks. What's your take on stinky tofu? And if it can be good, where can we get it?
Your take.
So this is where I feel guilty for being American. I don't like stinky tofu because I'm American born. It's sort of like the fact that like I drink ice water instead of hot tea. So as my mom said, you're so American. So that's my take on it. But I feel like Min's gonna have a much more.
You know,
it's really stinky. It's like total. It's like totally.
We talked about cheese.
Yeah.
And we talked about accidents. Stinky tofu is an accident. Tofu left somewhere, fermented, did not want to waste it, so let's cook it. Let's deep fry it. And it tasted great deep fried. So we don't make it. I eat stinky tofu when I travel. We don't make it because it ferment. We don't want any fermentation in our plant. Airborne, and you contaminate everything. So if you want to make stinky tofu, come to me and I'll teach you how to make it at home without firm tofu.
It's like durian. Anyway.
Yes.
So we're going to take just one more question, and then I'm going to have a few announcements to make, so don't get up right away after this question.
You get the last question.
How do you deal with the backlash against soy? Like, I'm convinced, I've been vegan for like 20 years, but now everyone's scared of phytoestrogens, and I have to convince people that, no, everything is fine. But it's, it's become a thing where you can write soy-free on a product, and that actually helps sell it rather than the opposite.
Well, that's a really good question. That's a question that only exists in America. Phytoestrogens exists in all plants. For those of you who are not aware of this misinformation, it was in the 80s when tofu was beginning to establish itself as a food here, that there was a lot of misinformation about, oh, is it good for you, is it bad for you? And like everything else, there's two sides. Tofu has been around 2,000 plus years. If there's an epidemic on tofu, we would know about it already. However, I think the question is relevant because tofu comes from soybeans, and only a very small portion of the soybeans grown in the US become tofu, which is a very whole food. The majority of it goes to feeds, and a portion of the soybeans becomes a processed protein called soy protein isolate. Soy protein isolate was originally made not as a food, but as a paper coating. And there's a great documentary that that's why I love you asking me a question, because you're a researcher. There's a documentary on PBS. It's about a PhD chemist, African American, who discovered soy protein isolate. And it's an amazing documentary, and what he does with soy protein isolate started a paint company. But over the course of time, soy protein isolate became this really cheap, easy to manipulate flour. And people thought, why don't I make something with it that's food? And so that's a more processed way of consuming soy. It's also a more processed way of consuming anything. So a lot of the research that you see about negative, like whatever you hear about soy, almost 100% of it is based on soy protein isolate. All the tofu research in Japan and China, even actually in the US, which is beginning to happen more, has shown that it has great health benefits.
I mean, coming from having worked in Washington, D.C., I mean, if you're having those conversations, I would point out that a lot of these kinds of stories are a pushback from the meat industry that feels very threatened, obviously, by the rise of soy and tofu and, vegetarian meat patties and whatnot. And in the same way that Exxon and the oil companies kind of sow sort of interesting science about climate change, it's sort of the same idea. It is a narrative that exists mostly in the United States. I mean, it's really actually fascinating coming from being a reporter how science that's sort of pushed by certain industry groups can sort of like propagate out into the mainstream, especially around things involving environment and food. Are we good?
Speaking of food,
Yeah.
that's a great, very academic way to end.